Ella Brooks wiped her clammy hands on the stained apron wrapped around her waist as she glanced nervously toward the gleaming stainless steel counters. The kitchen thrummed with the rush of orders, clanging pots, and sizzling pans, but to Ella, it felt more like a battlefield. Tonight, as always, she was the lowly kitchen assistant, responsible for the smallest tasks but carrying the heaviest burden of proving herself. Her fingers trembled slightly as she chopped onions, determined to keep up with the relentless pace, though every slice seemed painfully slow. The doorway to the kitchen swung open with a commanding bang. Chef Marcus Grady entered, his tall frame and stern face casting an imposing shadow over the room. Known for his exacting standards and explosive temper, Marcus's reputation was enough to silence even the busiest kitchen. His sharp eyes scanned the room until they fixed on Ella. "You call that chopping? It's like you're trying to ruin tonight's service," he barked. His voice cut through the noise, halting the kitchen's flow. All eyes turned to Ella as Marcus stormed closer, every harsh word driving a dagger through her confidence. She swallowed hard, cheeks burning, feeling the sting of humiliation in the piercing glare of the entire staff. I'm doing my best, chef," she stammered, trying to steady her voice. Marcus scoffed. "Your best isn't good enough. Pick up the pace or get out of my kitchen." Ella's heart pounded as the buzz of activity continued, the pressure building like a storm inside her. She bit her lip, nodding silently, the weight of those words sinking in. Little did she know, the night was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would alter everything she thought about her place in this chaotic world of heat and steel. The kitchen seemed to close in on Ella as Chef Marcus's harsh words echoed in her ears. Her hands shook slightly as she resumed chopping, trying to ignore the sting of humiliation burning behind her eyelids. The atmosphere was thick, the air heavy with heat and tension. Around her, the kitchen staff worked with hurried efficiency, their faces set in expressions that mingled exhaustion and focus. Some glanced her way with a flicker of sympathy, others avoided eye contact altogether, perhaps unwilling to cross Marcus or unwilling to acknowledge the public scolding they had just witnessed. Marcus hovered like a storm cloud, his eyes snapping to her every time she hesitated, every time her knife wavered. "Faster, Brooks. You're making us all look bad," he spat, voice loud enough to cut through the crescendo of clattering dishes and sizzling pans. Ella's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to remain composed, for she knew that losing her temper here would only validate Marcus's disdain. A moment later, he took a step closer, speaking lower but no less sharp. "Listen, you're slowing us down and you don't belong in this kitchen during peak hours if you can't keep up. I want you out of here for the next half hour. Find something else to do, but stay out of my way." The other kitchen assistants exchanged uneasy glances. A few eyes lingered on Ella with concern, while others went back to their stations with measured indifference. No one spoke openly about how the chef treated her. It was tacitly understood that Marcus wielded his temper like a weapon, and nobody wanted to get caught in its path. Ella packed up her small station with trembling hands, the onions, the garlic, the carefully measured herbs, all the little pieces she had been preparing for the next dish. She felt as if the rest of the kitchen's energy was pressing down on her, mocking the awkwardness that engulfed her in this moment. She almost wanted to apologize to the silence itself. Retreating to a quiet corner beyond the reach of the stove's fierce glow, Ella leaned against the cold tile wall, closing her eyes for a split second. The heat from the kitchen still radiated off every surface, but in that brief pause, she felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. Why had the day already felt so heavy with impossible expectations? She was so close to tears she could taste the salt on her lips, but she swallowed hard and forced the feeling down. Her breath caught as Marcus's voice broke through the kitchen buzz again. "Ella. The critic is here, and they want to meet you." Her eyes snapped open. The critique? What did that mean? She pushed herself off the wall, her heart skittering in confusion and a flicker of hope. The critic arriving meant something important, something she had scarcely dared to consider. But if Marcus wanted her out of the kitchen, why would the critic ask for her? She glanced toward him, but his stern expression didn't soften. Instead, he barked out the order again, "Get out there, now." Out of the kitchen, Ella stepped quietly into the dining room, blinking against the bright, warm lighting and the murmur of guests enjoying their meals. The dining room was a contrast to the adrenaline and chaos behind the swinging kitchen doors. Here, soft laughter floated through the air, glasses clinked gently, and the scent of carefully prepared dishes filled the air. The rustic elegance of dark wooden tables and flickering candlelight lent a cozy ambience that made Ella feel suddenly exposed, like she was out of place in her apron and simple work clothes. The maitre d', a broad-shouldered man named Simon, pointed discreetly toward a corner table. There sat Henry Walsh, a food critic known for his sharp pen and unyielding standards, a man whose writings could make or break a restaurant's reputation overnight. Ella stiffened at the sight. For a moment, it felt as if the whole restaurant's gaze had descended on her. "Ms. Brooks, please," Simon said quietly, guiding her forward with a polite nod. Henry looked up, his eyes briefly meeting hers, appraising and curious. "I wanted to speak with the person responsible for the preparation of the vegetable medley. It was remarkable tonight." Ella blinked, surprised. I assisted with most of the prep work," she said softly, unsure how to respond to the unexpected praise. The other guests at nearby tables began to take notice, their conversations dipping into whispers as waitstaff exchanged looks. Word spread quickly when a critic asked to meet someone unexpected. Ella felt like the world tilted slightly as she stood there in the formal dining room, the weight of 1,000 uncertain eyes on her. "Tell me about your process," Henry said, leaning in with an expression that was more interested than judgmental. Ella took a slow breath, the nerves still fluttering but tempered by a surge of something stronger, confidence drawn from long hours of learning, practice, and quiet resilience. "Well," she began, "we start with fresh, seasonal vegetables, each cut to precise dimensions so they cook evenly. The onions are caramelized slowly to bring out their sweetness, while the herbs are added at the last moment to preserve their freshness. It's a balance of textures and flavors, aiming to complement the main courses without overpowering them." Henry nodded, clearly intrigued. Encouraged, Ella continued, "I believe every ingredient has a story to tell. When you prepare food, you're not just following a recipe, you're creating an experience. That's why I'm meticulous about each step." As she spoke, the initial shock on the faces of nearby staff softened into something else, admiration, perhaps, or a dawning recognition that there was depth and thought behind every simple action she took. A few of her coworkers edged closer, their skepticism gradually melting away as they realized this quiet kitchen assistant possessed a knowledge and passion for food that exceeded their expectations. Chef Marcus, overhearing from the kitchen door, frowned. His jaw tightened as he shifted uneasily, though his pride wouldn't allow any sign of concession. Henry finally smiled, the first genuine warmth Ella had seen all evening. "Impressive," he said simply, jotting down a few notes. "It's rare to meet someone so attuned to the artistry behind the dishes. Your care shines through." Ella's cheeks flushed, part embarrassment, part pride. For the first time, those compliments felt real, deserved. The murmurs among the diners grew louder, strengthened by the unexpected turn of events. Simon discreetly whispered to a few servers to ease the tension in the kitchen. The staff began to treat Ella with a newfound respect. Her usual invisibility transformed into a spotlight she never sought but now couldn't ignore. Ella's eyes found Chef Marcus again, who stood motionless just beyond the doorway, his face unreadable but his posture uncharacteristically subdued. As Henry rose to leave, he gave a nod toward the kitchen. "Ms. Brooks, you've earned a reply to your efforts that many might overlook. Keep at it." Ella nodded, her throat tight with emotion. The buzz of the dining room felt different now, filled with possibility instead of dread. Yet beneath her relief lay a simmering tension. Could Marcus truly accept this shift? Or was this sudden praise the start of new challenges? The room's energy remained electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Ella wanted to savor the fragile victory but knew the night's real test was only beginning. What would you do if your quiet dedication suddenly attracted all eyes, including those who doubted you? Would you shrink back or rise to meet the unexpected? The sudden attention had left the kitchen buzzing with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Ella stood just beyond the line where the kitchen's intense heat faded into the cooler air of the dining room, the sharp scent of rosemary and thyme mingling with her own nervous excitement. She could still hear the occasional whisper brushing past the tiled walls and the cautious footsteps of servers returning to their stations. Henry Walsh, the critic who'd just lauded her, had stepped away, yet the weight of his unexpected praise lingered like an electric current. It had unfolded so naturally, yet so contrary to everything she had anticipated that evening. For a moment, she wondered if those words might have been a kindness, an encouragement extended from the man who knew well how fragile the journey of a kitchen assistant often was. But she also felt something else, a simmering fire beneath her nerves, a quiet certainty that she was much more than the mistakes Marcus had admonished, more than the silent apologies she forced herself to swallow each day. Tonight was different. Tonight, the possibility that she could transcend the expectations of the kitchen became tangible, almost real. She slid back through the swinging kitchen doors, the hustle and clatter washing over her anew. Marcus still stood near the stove, muscles tight, eyes darting her way with something equal parts suspicion and resentment. His brow was furrowed deeper than before, lips pressed tight in a line that spoke of puzzlement rather than immediate anger. Ella cleared her throat, voice tentative but growing steadier. "Chef, I'm grateful for the opportunity to explain the techniques behind the dishes. I hope it's clear my commitment runs deep." Marcus said nothing for a long moment, eyes narrowing as if attempting to dissect something beyond just her words. Several kitchen assistants glanced up cautiously, their expressions shifting, some curious, others waiting for the storm to break. But Marcus surprised them. Instead of snapping, he just nodded sharply once and turned back to the sizzling pans without a word. The room's tension eased fractionally. Ella's relief was brief. She knew that in Marcus's world, respect was rarely handed down, it was earned under pressure, through proof of skill and resilience behind the heat of stoves and shouting orders. Henry Walsh's praise had stirred more than just affirmation, it had put her under a microscope. The staff who had once cast her sidelong glances now circled her with muted interest, occasionally dropping questions about her knowledge or asking how she had developed her skill with flavors and technique. Ella answered as best she could, her voice firmer now, with stories of her training under some of the finest chefs in Europe, the relentless hours, the constant learning. Each answer peeled away layers of doubt, revealing a wellspring of talent and dedication. She confessed to choosing this modest position not because her ambitions had diminished, but because she needed this quiet ground to clear her head, to rebuild after a personal heartbreak that had left her drained and uncertain. The staff listened, some nodding with understanding, others silently impressed. The taste of vindication invigorated Ella. When Marcus, usually an unspoken specter of intimidation, called her over to adjust the plating on a signature dish, she felt the sting of nerves and the thrill of challenge mingle inside her stomach. Commands that once felt like barbed reprimands now became opportunities to prove herself, to reclaim ownership of her role. With careful hands, Ella added a sprig of fresh thyme, the tang of citrus zest, and a precise drizzle of the reduction sauce Marcus demanded. Under her touch, the dish transformed from simple to artful, catching the gleam of the dining room's soft light just right. Marcus looked on silently, nodding slightly, a rare motif of approval in his otherwise stern demeanor. The kitchen watchful onlookers let out quiet murmurs of encouragement, small sparks of collective pride blossoming behind the scenes. Later, when the evening's rush settled, Henry approached again. "Ms. Brooks," he said with a smile that carried the weight of genuine respect, "your understanding of flavor and technique is beyond what many kitchen assistants possess. I believe there's a story here that needs to be told." Ella felt the gravity of those words, the recognition not just of her work tonight, but of the long, quiet hours behind every plate. Marcus, standing a little away, allowed himself a small, reluctant smile. There was no doubt Eleanor had changed something within the kitchen, and perhaps himself, too. A few days later, the restaurant staff gathered for a brief meeting where the head of operations praised Ella's contributions and suggested she might be invited to collaborate on the next seasonal menu. This, after a period of doubt and condescension, signaled a shift, the doors to opportunity cracking open. Ella's journey had been a quiet testament to perseverance and unspoken strength. Those harsh words shouted at her in the kitchen, once crushing, now seemed like distant echoes fading into a background of newfound respect and possibility. Her passion for culinary artistry had burst forth, surprising both friend and foe, and fundamentally altering the dynamic between her and Marcus. The crisp autumn air outside greeted Ella as she stepped away from the restaurant that night. The stars shined steadily above, the world vast and full of promise. Her thoughts wandered to the long months ahead and the challenge of stepping out from the shadows of doubt into the light of her own potential. Marcus, usually guarded and taciturn, found himself watching her leave with an unfamiliar respect, wondering if this modest assistant was going to teach him a lesson in what it truly meant to be a chef. The kitchen was no longer just a place of toil and whispered judgment. It had become, at last, a place where Ella Brooks belonged. Ella stood alone in her small apartment, the dim light casting soft shadows across the worn wooden floors and mismatched furniture. The modest space was a far cry from the gleaming kitchens of Europe where she had once worked, but it was the place she'd chosen as a shelter, a quiet refuge away from expectation and judgment. As she rested her hands on the counter, memories drifted back, years of late nights in Michelin-starred restaurants, the clang of pots in vast halls where chefs barked orders with relentless precision, and long hours battling exhaustion to perfect every plate. She was, once, a rising star in the culinary world. But circumstances had shifted. A personal loss, one too tender to speak aloud, had compelled her to slow down, to strip away the grandeur and seek solace in simplicity. That's why, dressed plainly and with little adornment, she had taken up her position in this city restaurant, content to work behind the scenes, far from the spotlight and expectations that had once weighed heavily. No one here knew of her past, her pedigree. She was just the kitchen assistant, the quiet woman chopping vegetables at a relentless pace. That wasn't how she wanted it, but it was necessary. The understated uniform, the humility in her approach, it all shielded her while she found herself again. Her evening at the restaurant had run deeper than she anticipated. After the critics' unexpected meeting, whispers of a story began to circulate among the staff. Henry Walsh's praise was more than a fleeting compliment, it was an acknowledgement that her talent and dedication could no longer be overlooked. And yet, she remained cautious. Trusting in others' recognition was delicate, especially after years of being discounted, dismissed even by those she most respected. Tonight, as she prepared a simple supper in her tidy kitchen, those moments replayed vividly in her mind. The harsh glare from Chef Marcus, the hush of the kitchen crowd, the dining room's soft light, and Henry Walsh's genuine smile remained etched into her memory like a secret badge. Ella had always viewed cooking as an art but also a deeply personal act. Every ingredient chosen was a piece of history, every chop a gesture of care. She could tell stories not with words, but with flavor combinations, with textures and aromas. That was her gift, and her passion. Her phone buzzed on the countertop, startling her from her reverie. A message from Marcus appeared, "Need to talk. Tomorrow, after service." Her brow furrowed. The tone was brief, but the implication was clear. Somewhere beneath the gruff exterior, there might be an opening, an opportunity to bridge the divide. She paused before typing back, "Thank you. I'll be there." Resting back against the counter, she allowed herself a slow breath. This was the moment she had awaited for so long, the chance to step beyond the role she'd been cast into and show who she truly was. It had not been easy. The scars of doubt carved deep by harsh words, the quiet moments of uncertainty alone in shadowed corridors, the incessant pressure to prove herself, these things had tested her at every turn. But now, beneath it all, the foundation was steady. The next day, as the restaurant filled with the familiar sounds of sizzling pans and shouted orders, Ella found herself walking toward the office at the back of the kitchen when Marcus called out. "Ella." She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. He was less imposing now, the sharp edges of his demeanor softened by something like genuine consideration. "I've been thinking," he began, voice lower, less commanding. "About tonight. About your work." Ella's heart quickened. This was the moment, either a step forward or a door closing. "We've had our differences," he admitted, "but I was wrong to judge you so harshly without understanding what you bring to this kitchen. You showed a dedication I respect, and your knowledge, it surprised me." Ella nodded, swallowing a lump that threatened to rise in her throat. "Thank you, chef. I appreciate that." There was a pause. Then he gestured toward the menu board where daily specials were scribbled in chalk, smudged at the edges. "I want you to be involved in the new seasonal menu. Your input." For a moment, the words hung in the air as though they were fragile treasures, too precious to claim immediately. Ella's voice was steady but quiet. "I'd be honored." The kitchen buzzed softly around them, the ever-present orchestra of knives, bubbling pots, and murmured orders, and in that space, something new blossomed. A mutual respect, fragile but promising. Later that evening, as she prepared her station, the kitchen assistants glanced at her with renewed interest. Some offered tentative conversations, sharing tips or asking about new techniques. The camaraderie she had long hoped for was beginning to take root. Ella's story, the woman who once worked among the world's finest but chose humility over acclaim, who bore loss in silence while nurturing ambition, was becoming known not by whispered gossip but through actions and presence. Her past didn't define her, her resilience and grace did. As the weeks passed, the restaurant's atmosphere shifted subtly. Marcus's temper remained notorious, but now accompanied by occasional glimpses of mentorship. He was challenging on occasion, but his expectations reflected respect rather than disdain. Ella thrived on the balance, the space to learn, to contribute, and to grow. More importantly, she no longer felt invisible. One afternoon, seated by the window during a rare break, she watched the flow of the city outside. The colors of autumn spread like a warm embrace through the trees lining the streets. It was a reminder that change was constant, natural, and sometimes beautiful. She thought of the journey ahead, not just within the kitchen's glowing hearth but beyond, toward the dreams she nurtured in quiet moments. The path wasn't without difficulty. There would be days when the weight of past doubts and present challenges pressed hard. But she had learned that sometimes strength was found not in victories alone, but in persistence, in the quiet courage to keep showing up. Ella Brooks was no longer the tentative assistant who had once stood trembling beneath Marcus's glare. She was becoming something more, an artist crafting her own destiny, carefully and confidently. And the culinary world, with all its chaos and fire, was beginning to recognize that fact. Tomorrow's meeting with Marcus was not an end, but the start of a new chapter, one where her true worth might finally be seen. Her fingers grazed the smooth edge of a knife resting on the counter, a familiar comfort. She looked up and smiled softly. The future was hers to shape. Weeks slipped by, and the restaurant settled into a rhythm tinged with change. The once imposing shadow of Chef Marcus Grady seemed to lean a little less heavily over the kitchen, as if the undeniable presence of Ella Brooks had shifted the balance beneath his feet. Those who once bristled at her presence now nodded with quiet respect. Even Marcus's notoriously steely demeanor showed signs of softening. It wasn't lost on Ella that the atmosphere had evolved. What had begun as a sharp divide between gruff command and hesitant endurance had transformed into a partnership, still imperfect, but grounded in mutual recognition. Tonight was a pivotal one. The owner of the restaurant, a man named Mr. Collins, had called a meeting with the kitchen staff after hours. The tension in the air was palpable, but not solely from nerves, it was anticipation. Ella swept her gaze through the group assembled in the dimly lit back room, faces tired but alert, stained aprons hung loosely about necks, worn hands folded in laps. Mr. Collins cleared his throat. "I want to speak to all of you about recent developments in our kitchen, particularly the contributions of Ms. Brooks." Ella felt her stomach tighten. She glanced discreetly at Marcus, who stood with arms crossed but eyes closely tracking the owner's words. Henry Walsh's glowing review had set waves in motion, ripples spreading far beyond the walls of this one restaurant. The praise he had given Ella stirred interest among diners, suppliers, even competitors. It wasn't just the acknowledgement of skill, it was a spotlight on character and perseverance that inspired those around her. Mr. Collins nodded toward Marcus. "Chef, there has been feedback concerning your management style. While we respect your passion and expertise, it's clear that some of the tactics have been counterproductive." Marcus's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to Ella briefly before resting back on the floor. The others held their breath, waiting to see his reaction. "Effective leadership," Mr. Collins continued, "requires fostering talent, not diminishing it. Ella has proven herself invaluable, and I'm officially inviting her to collaborate on our upcoming menu updates." Soft murmurs of approval rose among the staff. Ella felt a flush of warmth spread across her cheeks. The owner's expression sharpened, voice steady and firm. "Marcus, I expect you to support this. Additionally, there will be changes to your responsibilities to ensure a healthier working environment for everyone." A silence descended, dense with implication. Marcus exhaled slowly, a quiet nod signifying reluctant acceptance. The room seemed to exhale with him, a tension released. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Marcus approached Ella alone, away from prying eyes and ears. The chase of the day had faded, replaced by a rare softness in his gaze. "Ella," he began, voice low, "I was wrong. Not just about your skills, but about how I treated you. That won't happen again." Ella met his gaze evenly. "Thank you, chef. It means a lot." He paused, then smiled, a genuine, small curve of lips rarely reserved for anyone. "I'm glad you stayed. You belong here." Her heart fluttered with bitter sweetness. The battles had been hard won, but this moment was the one that mattered. From that day forward, Ella's role evolved, not merely a kitchen assistant, but a creative force shaping the conversations around food, flavor, and presentation. Her ideas were welcomed, her voice respected. She was no longer a background shadow, she was a centerpiece. Word of the transformation spread beyond the restaurant, igniting quiet admiration among peers and patrons alike. Ella found herself freer to express the truths she harbored, bringing fresh perspectives drawn from her travels and experiences. Her presence taught lessons too, that the path to greatness is often forged through humility, resilience, and an unwavering passion. On a crisp evening some months later, Ella stood in the kitchen as Marcus watched a newly plated dish glide toward the dining room. The quality was undeniable, food crafted with care, forged through collaboration and mutual respect. Ella caught Marcus's eye, their unspoken acknowledgement heavy in the air. No words were needed. Later, as she closed the restaurant's doors, the day's fatigue settled into a quiet contentment. She breathed deeply, the scent of roasted herbs and baked bread wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. Her phone buzzed. A message from Henry Walsh awaited, looking forward to seeing where your journey leads next. Keep shining. She smiled, fingers curling around the screen. Before the glow of the night fully settled, Ella typed a brief message to friends and followers. Sometimes the hardest paths lead to the strongest places. Grateful for growth, for challenges, and for the kindness found when we least expect it. What would you do in Ella's shoes? The story's closing words invited reflection, an open door for connection. Her life was far from perfect or finished. There were still hurdles ahead, still moments of doubt and effort. But Ella Brooks had stepped fully into her own, emerging from shadows into a place where her light not only shone, it inspired. And as the screen dimmed, the narrator's voice invited viewers softly, if Ella's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. Share your thoughts below. We'll see you in our next story.